You saw at once in a woman's eyes not softness, not tenderness, but something ancient and unspeakable. A flicker gone before you could name it. It wasn't love, it wasn't admiration, it was need, but not for you, for what you withheld, for what you didn't say, for the weight of your absence in a room full of your presence. She leaned closer, not when you praised her, but when you turned your gaze elsewhere. And in that silence, she bloomed. There is a look women give when they're near the man they cannot possess, not because he is above them, but because he doesn't kneel. It's not desire, it's the collapse of illusion. It's what happens when centuries of romantic fantasy dissolve into a cold stare that doesn't flinch. She wants the story. Yes, but only if it ends in her defeat. You've mistaken their sighs for love, but love is too gentle a word for what haunts them. What they crave wears a colder mask. You will not understand it, but you will see it once, maybe twice before it disappears again, like a shadow behind your own face. You were taught to offer, to bring warmth, presence, attentiveness. You were told it was love they desired, that listening, understanding, patience. These were the currencies of affection. But when you gave them freely, they withered, their eyes drifted, their bodies leaned away. Something in your kindness made them restless, as if they had been promised a storm and handed a candle. You mistook their boredom for your failure, but it was not you who failed. It was the illusion. You thought the mirror showed you her, but it only showed your reflection softened by hope. You missed the silence behind her words, the tension behind her smiles, the disappointment not in what you did, but in what you lacked, an edge, a silence, a refusal. They don't want to be understood. They want to be undone, and not by tenderness, but by the absence that bruises, by the gaze that refuses to explain itself. That is what makes them feel real, not comfort, not approval, but the sharp friction of not being chosen. You felt her drift, and you leaned forward. You reached out again, and again, thinking your closeness would tether her. But every step you took toward her pushed her deeper into her own labyrinth, because her desire does not move toward the light. It curves inward. It bends toward contradiction. She is not looking for peace. She is looking for something that echoes her doubt. And you, in your desperate clarity, gave her nothing to reflect on. You were too visible, too legible, too present, and so you disappeared. There is no cruelty in your silence, only a mirror that refuses to flatter. She stares into you, expecting romance, fantasy, softness, and finds only stillness. A man unmoved by her movements, a shape that does not bend, and in that unyielding silence, her longing sharpens. You become not a person, but a question she cannot answer. Not a lover, but a figure carved from doubt. And it is precisely that doubt that awakens the part of her untouched by stories and songs. She does not want you to speak. She wants to guess what you are thinking. She wants to invent reasons for your silence, to fill it with fantasy and fear. Your indifference becomes her stage, your coldness, her mirror. The less you say, the more she confesses to herself. The less you move, the more she dances around you. You are not her destination. You are her abyss. Do you remember the one who said you made her feel invisible? She meant it as an accusation, but it was a confession. She stood in front of you, wrapped in softness, dripping in signals, and your stillness became unbearable. Not because it was unkind, but because it forced her to face herself. No validation, no comfort, no escape into narrative, just her exposed in your silence. This is the mirror without reflection, a man who does not serve her story, who does not offer lines to rehearse, who does not echo back the image she's rehearsed in every bathroom mirror since girlhood. You are not a prop, you are not a priest, you are not her redeemer, and in that absence, she either flees or she begins to circle. She will test you, first with warmth, then with distance, then with chaos. She will press against the edges of your silence, searching for weakness, for hunger, for the smallest tremor that tells her you need her. If she finds it, she will pity you, not because you are weak, but because you are now explainable. But if you hold not with force, but with stillness, she will fracture. Not all women, not all the time, but those who carry the hunger will always come to the man who doesn't try to tame them, because the one who doesn't reach for them is the only one who isn't caught in the same illusion. You do not promise her anything, and that absence becomes sacred. It is not cruelty, it is the refusal to lie. Her darkest desire is not to be loved, it is to be seen by something that does not bend for her, because only that which does not need her can confirm that she exists beyond manipulation. You think she wants sweetness, she says she wants safety, but watch where her eyes go when she believes no one is watching. They do not drift toward comfort, they are pulled toward gravity. You became the man she couldn't describe, the one who left no wound, no words, no clear ending. And because of that, you never left her. You became a shadow in her memory, not a name. She doesn't tell stories about you. She remembers you like a dream that never resolved a door she forgot to close, a silence that made her feel naked. What did you do? Nothing. That was the key. You didn't flinch. You didn't smile to reassure her. You didn't fold yourself into the shape of her comfort. You were just there, like a wall, like the moon, like something that could not be seduced. And in that presence, she surrendered more than she realized. Not her heart, but her defenses. Her desire is not romantic, it is existential. She longs to be unmasked, not adored, to be shattered, not consoled. But no woman will admit this out loud because she herself doesn't understand it. She only feels it when she's around the man who doesn't need her beauty, her charm, her softness. The man who offers no interpretation, no story, no promise. You were that man once, maybe without knowing, and she hated you for it, and loved you for it, and never forgot you. She searched for you in the warmth of better men, in the arms of those who tried to save her, but none of them made her feel small in the way she secretly craved, not degraded, not disrespected, but humbled by the vastness of your absence. This is what Schopenhauer knew, that desire is not kind, that love is not fair, that the female longing does not bend toward goodness, but toward the abyss, and the abyss does not explain itself. It simply waits, in silence, while she slowly steps forward, not because she trusts, but because she is tired of being seen through. You do not reflect her, you erase her illusions, and in that vanishing, she finds something more terrifying than rejection, indifference, not active cruelty, but the cold absence of worship. And in that absence, she begins to question the one thing she was sure of her power. You are not her enemy. You are not even her mirror. You are the empty frame where her reflection should be. And when she stares too long, she sees something she cannot name and cannot stop chasing. That is where her darkest craving lives. Not in the man who loves her, but in the one who does not flinch, who does not soften, who sees everything and says nothing. You don't need to move. You never did. Every time you withheld, she came closer, Not because of some tactic, not because of strategy or charm, but because of what your silence did to her world. She could not explain why the warmth of others left her cold, or why your absence stung more than their affection. She only knew that in your stillness, something in her unraveled. Her certainties, her image, her will, all of it began to twist into questions she could not answer. You became a riddle with no beginning, and she became the woman who could not look away. She was used to being pursued, not just by men, but by mirrors, by attention, by the gravitational pull of being wanted. But in your presence, the usual orbit collapsed. You didn't orbit. You didn't even observe. You remained outside the game entirely, and that absence made her feel naked in a way no touch ever had. Not because you stripped her, but because she stripped herself, looking for a reflection that never came. You don't have to speak to dominate. A man becomes powerful not when he convinces, but when he refuses to explain. Your silence wasn't cruel, it was indifferent, and indifference, for a woman who has always been the center of 1,000 eyes, is more terrifying than hatred. Hatred still means attention, still means presence. But your lack of reaction dissolved her story before she could begin telling it. You became the absence that haunted her performance. It wasn't your charm that made her anxious. It was your vacancy. She brought her laughter, her tone, her well-rehearsed sighs, all the little rituals women use to pull a man closer. And nothing happened. You didn't mirror her energy. You didn't reward her cues. And so the ground beneath her shifted. She could no longer locate herself through your gaze, and that loss of orientation felt like death. A small, quiet death she could not stop thinking about. She kept testing. She asked questions to which you gave no emotional reply. She told stories expecting laughter, or nods, or sympathy, and you remained unmoved. She leaned in, then pulled away, then leaned in again. Her movements were not toward you, they were toward the gap you refused to close. Because in that gap lived the truth she wasn't trying to be loved. She was trying to collapse into something larger than herself, and you, in your silence, became that vastness. Every man she'd known had responded. Even the cold ones had flinched when she pulled the right string. But you were different. You didn't respond. You received. Like a wall that listened but never echoed, like a void that swallowed her signals and gave back nothing but space. And in that space, she began to hear herself, her own hunger, her own chaos, her own desire not for you, but for what you represented, a man who does not bend. You didn't silence her, she silenced herself in your presence, not out of fear, not out of shame, but out of exposure. Her words felt too thin, her stories too rehearsed. Everything she said to you bounced back without meaning, because you gave her no reward, no approval, no thread to follow. You didn't scold her, didn't mock her, you simply didn't chase. And in the absence of pursuit, she began to feel her own performance. The mask slipped, and beneath it, she wasn't sure what remained. That's the secret she'll never admit. It's not the attention that makes her feel alive, it's the withdrawal of it. Not from everyone. No. Only from the one man who sees her, but doesn't yield. She's not drawn to cruelty. She's drawn to contrast. To the man who stands like an unanswered question. To the man whose silence invites her to undress without ever being touched. Because in your refusal, you give her something no kindness can a reason to dissolve. She doesn't want to win you. She wants to break against you, and not because you hurt her, but because you don't move. That stillness becomes the ocean to her fire. It drowns her stories. It washes away her tactics. She's not chasing you. She's chasing the self that flickers when her will collapses, and your silence is the mirror in which she watches that collapse unfold. You do not owe her warmth. Warmth is everywhere. What she wants is the cold she cannot melt, the man who listens without being moved, who sees without reacting, the man who makes her feel uncertain in a world where she has always controlled the emotional weather. Your silence is not a void, it is a throne, and she kneels, not because you asked her to, but because she no longer remembers how to stand when you do not kneel back. She brings you her chaos, her softness, her fragments waiting for you to reach for them. But you don't. Not because you are withholding, but because you simply do not play the part. And in that refusal, she finds something more intimate than empathy. She finds herself crumbling. She will never say it, not in words, but she will show it in the way her voice softens, in the way her jokes falter, in the way she hesitates before speaking. She's not intimidated. She's exposed. Not because you've taken her power, but because she offered it to the silence, hoping to be undone. It is not dominance. It is not control. It is the presence of a man who does not orbit anyone's sun, a man who carries his own gravity, who needs no script to stand still. In that stillness, she folds, not from weakness, but from recognition. She sees in you the truth she cannot name, that surrender was always her deepest longing, and it can only be awakened by a man who does not try to make her feel safe. The others give her comfort. You give her confrontation, not with violence, but with silence, not with demands, but with absence. She thinks she wants connection, but what she craves is disappearance, to dissolve into something that refuses to define her, and you, by not reaching, become that disappearance. You are not better, you are not stronger, you are simply elsewhere, not unavailable, just untouchable. Your stillness is not distance, it is depth, and she senses it, even if she cannot name it. She feels the weight of your silence pressing against her stories. She feels the calm gravity of a man who does not need to speak to be heard. And in that gravity, she is pulled inward. Do not mistake her silence for peace. It is the silence of a woman who is finally unmasked, not by insult, not by revelation, but by stillness. She was not conquered. She surrendered, because the man who does not chase her as the only one she believes might be real. Everyone else wanted something. You wanted nothing, and in that nothing, she found the mirror she could not escape. She does not desire your warmth. She desires your silence, because in it, she is not adored. She is unmade, and that unmaking is the closest thing to love she's ever known. Not because it feels good, but because it feels true, and truth in her world is more precious than affection. You were never a threat. You were an absence that exposed the truth she spent her life covering with stories. And when she finally walked away, it was not because you pushed her. It was because she saw herself, naked, in your stillness. And it was too much. She will never say your name, but you will remain the silence she compares every voice to. She said she wanted safety. That's what she told the others. That's what she told herself. A man who listens, who reassures, who never raises his voice or his distance. But when he came kind, stable, gentle, she vanished. Not physically, emotionally. Her smile remained, but her soul retreated. The man who tried to protect her became the man she slowly began to resent, because no part of her needed protection. She needed surrender, not given, but taken, not with violence, but with indifference. A cold throne she could kneel before without being asked. She does not know why. She cannot explain why the man who adores her becomes the man she avoids, and why the one who withholds becomes the man she dreams of in silence. The kindness suffocates. The worship makes her recoil. She smiles to thank them, nods at the compliments, leans in when they open up, but inside, something twists. Not from guilt, from boredom, because adoration has no gravity. It floats, it follows. But what she truly craves is the weight of a man who does not flinch. She tests him, the soft one, until he finally breaks, until he snaps, or retreats, or begs. And once he does, the story ends. Not with rage, not with cruelty, but with quiet closure. He becomes explainable, categorized. He needed her. That was his mistake. Because what she wants is not to be needed. She wants to be devoured. She wants to feel that her presence is not begged for, but subdued. Not through touch, through gaze, through withdrawal, through the ritual of being overlooked by the man she cannot unsee. You were that man, not because you acted, but because you didn't. You didn't perform, you didn't pursue, and in that stillness, she collapsed. Her rituals of flirtation fell flat. Her dramatics gained no ground. Her charm dissolved in your silence like sugar in ice. And yet she kept returning, even in absence, especially in absence, because you became a wound that never bled, only a silent pulse beneath her skin, the echo of something that might have seen her and refused. Her craving was not for sex, it was not for praise, it was for the look that made her disappear. A man who gazes through her beauty and into the void behind it. A man who does not react, who does not chase, who does not ask her to become soft, because that silence, that cold removal, is what finally cradles her, not like a lover, but like a mirror in which she vanishes. And this vanishing, it feels holy. She carries herself like she's in control of her image, of her rhythm, of her worth. But control is not peace, it's a cage, and only the man who does not dance to her music can break it. She says she hates arrogance, but arrogance is still a posture. What disturbs her more is the man who does not even look, not out of hate, but because he does not need to. And in that blank space, she finds something unbearable, the absence of gravity where she once floated. You didn't teach her, you didn't punish her, you simply existed beyond her reach. And that unreachable quality is what she returns to. In her mind, in her fantasies, not to fix you but to collapse into you. She wants to be folded, bent, disassembled, not physically, psychologically. The one who rearranges her not with touch or words, but with absence. That is the cruelty she dreams of, and she will never admit it. Even in her warmest relationships, she waits for the moment when he stops speaking, when he grows cold, when he finally becomes the one she cannot tame. And if he doesn't, if he stays warm forever, she will leave, not angrily, but quietly, as if her body understood something her mind refused to name. You are not romantic, you are ritual, the silent God who asks for no prayer, yet receives worship through the ache of unanswered longing. You do not lift her up, you let her fall, and that descent becomes ecstasy, not because you harm her, but because you do not catch her. She falls alone, and in that solitude, her deepest self awakens. You do not want her, that is your power. Every smile you do not return, every movement you do not chase, every moment you do not explain becomes the stage on which she reveals herself. Not to you, to herself. You did not steal her heart. You erased the performance she once called love. She walks among men who give her everything, and she forgets them all. But you gave her nothing, and so you remain, because the absence of your hands became more intimate than all their kisses. The space you left unfilled became the room where her shadow finally spoke. Even when she swore you meant nothing, her dreams said otherwise. Not erotic dreams, symbolic ones, dreams of doors half closed, of windows she cannot open, of a figure at the edge of her bed who watches but never moves. She wakes and pretends not to understand, but her breath tells the truth. You were never the man she loved. You were the man who made her forget who she thought she was. It was never about dominance, not in the way they think. Dominance can be performed, but stillness cannot. You never tried to own her, and that is why she gave you everything she couldn't give to the men who tried. They bought her time. You stole her silence. You didn't text. You didn't chase. You didn't ask her how she felt. And yet, your presence disassembled her more than 1,000 kind gestures. She crumbled not out of fear, but out of memory. A memory she didn't have before you. A memory of surrender that did not beg for return, only recognition. She will love men. She will marry. She will find safety. But late at night, when the house is quiet, your name will whisper itself beneath her breath, not because she wants you back, but because no one else ever made her disappear without touching her. You didn't love her, and that became the most sacred wound of all. She said she wanted gentleness. She said she wanted peace. But what she really wanted was to kneel, not before cruelty, but before the unmoved, before the man who asked for nothing, who offered nothing, who stood like a pillar in the center of her emotional storm and refused to sway. She wanted to be broken not by harm, but by gravity. And you gave her that. You never claimed her. You never softened. And for that, she gave you the part of herself no one else ever saw. The part that wanted to kneel, to vanish, to be small before something greater than her will. You were not that man because you tried. You were that man because you didn't. Now she walks with smiles and laughter, but inside, a stillness remains. Your stillness. A crater shaped like absence. A silence shaped like truth. Not romantic, not tragic, simply irreversible. And that is the cradle of her surrender, not built by hands, not wrapped in love, but carved in ice. The ice you never melted, the mirror you never held up, the throne you never left. She doesn't want to be rescued, she wants to be undone, and you by doing nothing became the man who did exactly that. She no longer remembers what your voice sounded like, only that it didn't rise for her, that it didn't lean in, that it didn't tremble. She only remembers the shape of you, not your hands, but the space around them, not your words, but the pauses you let hang too long. You are no longer a memory, you are a silence, a wound she doesn't want to heal, a gate she never opened, and behind it, the shape of something she almost surrendered to, and never fully escaped. She said you were cold, but it was not coldness. It was refusal, sacred and still. She touched it only once, and now, every man after you feels warm in a way she cannot trust. She doesn't want to go back. She only wants to wonder if you ever turned your head once she left, but you didn't. And that, more than anything, made her real.